Hello and welcome back to the ocean, my friend. It is great to see you here. In this episode, we're going to be exploring New Zealand's Hauraki Gulf. The Hauraki Gulf is a unique marine environment that presents many opportunities, but also many challenges. Located on Auckland's doorstep, this area faces extreme fishing pressure. Visibility in the Gulf typically ranges from tragic to acceptable, with rare spells of clear water. Despite all the obstacles that lay in our way, spearfishing the Hauraki Gulf is extremely satisfying because you have to really work for every fish. For our first dive today, we've launched the boat at Takapuna and boosted out east to those further islands where we can hopefully get into the clean water. And boy, did we get into the clean water. Diving in the Hauraki Gulf, often real murky. It rains a screw for about a week, but today we were onto it. It's real rare to get conditions like this, and I was loving it. Eagle rays are a common sight when diving in and around the Hauraki Gulf. While they're not aggressive, they're not harmless. They're still capable of delivering a painful sting. So be respectful, but there's no need to fear the eagle ray. There are a lot of factors that influence the clarity of the water. For example, rain, wind, swell, tide, current, algae, and proximity to rivers. Every dive should start with a plan. You should have at least a rough idea of where you're going and what the conditions are going to be like. Even a small amount of research can benefit you greatly during the dive. There are amazing technologies available to us nowadays, from marine charts to weather forecasting. Why not utilize them? At the surface, above the weed line, as I'm breathing up, a school of coherer approaches mid-water. This is typical behavior for these fish. Often they don't like being right down near the bottom, instead cruising in the open water. Choosing a fish from a school can often be difficult. I didn't have a hard time this time. Every time you shoot a fish, you're potentially missing out on the opportunity of another fish. Say you shoot that fish and a better fish comes through. Opportunity cost. If you take the opportunity, there might be a cost associated with it. So, diving with a buddy is great because they can capitalize on this. If I shoot this fish, something else comes in, that means my buddy can take advantage of it. I'm not going to lose out as much on that opportunity cost of shooting that fish. So, I've got the fish on the end of the spear wriggling around. The bro Floyd goes down. We're out with Floyd today, he's been in a couple of videos now. If you're out diving by yourself, the best play is always going to be bringing the fish in as fast as possible. Because while it's out there, you run the risk of sharks coming in. It's going to be a lot harder dealing with that, with a fish fighting on your line and by yourself, than if you're with a buddy. And even if something does come past and you're by yourself and you got a fish fighting, what are you going to do? It's asking for trouble. Clear water can often lead to more effective hunting. It allows you to plan out your dives more beforehand. You get to see where the ledges are, see where the drop-offs are, and really kind of formulate a plan as you approach. I feel like our minds process the world in three ways: reactions, intuition, and thoughts. Reactions being involuntary responses to stimuli. Having reactions is a good thing. You need to be able to think on the spot very quickly. Not even think, just act. If somebody throws a ball at your head, there isn't enough time for thought or intuition. It's reaction. Reaction is great in circumstances like this, when there simply isn't time. However, it's better to see these things coming from a distance. Reactive actions usually have little regard for the long term. So the more we can move away from acting in a reactive way, the better. This is only done through thought and intuition. This obviously applies to spearfishing. The more we think about things, the less we have to react. Spearfishing should never be about quick reactions, swinging your gun around, aiming at fish, trying to track them and figure out where they're coming from. They're coming from all sorts of different directions and you're trying to react to it. That's not what spearfishing is about. Good spearfishing is thought out and planned. A good dive starts with a good plan. It's not reactions. The more you can work out before you leave the surface, the more effective you can be with your time. Where are you going to make a dive? How deep are you going to dive? Where do you think the fish are going to come from? What's the current doing? Where are you going to hide? You should have all this stuff worked out before you leave the surface, so you can enjoy your time down there and hunt effectively. Leather jackets are interesting fish, and not bad on the table either. Not the brightest. Because they're overlooked by a lot of people, they're still abundant, even in the Hauraki Gulf, where a lot of other fish species have diminished significantly in numbers. Getting close to a leather jacket is not difficult. Doing a good dive bomb, 9 times out of 10 you'll get within shooting range. What you're doing is making a dive perfectly vertical with your gun extended out in front of you towards the fish. The idea is you're trying to minimize your visibility to the fish. If you can get the sun behind you, that's even better, so you adjust the shadow. You're keeping your whole body in line, minimizing your profile. If you approach the fish side on, you're going to be a lot scarier. I'm really not too fussed on shooting leather jackets. This day I was just sticking out for a kingfish, and it'll be a waste if I was to shoot a leather jacket before shooting a kingfish. I just feel mean at that point. So I didn't give these guys too much of a hard time. I was sticking out for maybe a cheeky stab, however, I was on my way shortly after. Over the duration of a dive, I'm making drops to different depths to try and work out where the fish are. Shallow, medium, deep. It's hard to tell a lot of the time where they're going to be holding, because in different areas, it's going to be at different depths. One thing I find time and time again diving in the Hauraki Gulf is as you get deeper, it gets murkier. And it's not so bad when it's like this. But when it goes from like 4 or 5 meters viz to 2 meters viz, it can be pretty scary. And there aren't necessarily less fish. It's just less comfortable to dive. One time when I was diving, I heard an engine approaching, and I decided to try and wait it out. That was one of the worst decisions of my life, and it nearly cost me very dearly. So when I hear engine approaching, it's back up to the surface. I don't mess around with that. It isn't always flat seas and clear water, unfortunately. Welcome to Narrow Neck Beach on the North Shore. Situated between Takapuna and Devonport, it might not be somewhere you think of when you think spearfishing locations. However, I can assure you that there are still fish out here. It takes time, it takes effort, but if you're willing to put in the yards, you can actually shoot fish on the North Shore in Auckland. From what I have seen personally, the kelp along the North Shore reefs actually seems to be very healthy. I hardly ever see kinners out here, and never really see kinner barons, which is honestly quite surprising. It's amazing that there's still reefs, intact reefs with fish living on them and kelp, and all that wonderful stuff so close to home. Like literally North Shore of Auckland, bro. Like you can go diving on a reef with fish. Unbelievable. I have dived quite a few spots on this coastline now, but one place that keeps me coming back is the Takapuna Reef. Between Milford and Takapuna, there is actually quite a lot of reef structure. I'm especially favourable to diving the south end, the Takapuna side, having grown up in the area. On an outgoing tide, this south end can actually catch a little bit of current, which is unusual for spots on the shore, where it's usually very slack water. However, outgoing tide means worse viz usually. All the stuff coming out of the harbour isn't very nice to dive in. If you are ever diving on the North Shore, always have a float with you. Be very careful of boats and jet skis. There are a lot of them. Just off the Takapuna boat ramp there is a jet ski rental place. Every person that goes out from there is basically a bullet ricocheting around the ocean. Keep an eye out. Don't assume that people can see your flag or even understand what it means really, because a lot of them won't. As divers, we often worry about sharks. However, boats pose a much greater risk to your life. I have always been surprised that more people don't dive the North Shore. It's honestly pretty worthwhile. The travel is minimal. The shore diving is fucking easy, bro. Like real easy compared to a lot of spots. And there are still fish around. But all the time I've been diving the North Shore, I haven't seen any other divers. I've been diving it on and off since 2019. Since then, I've been the only person I've seen in the water really. See people swimming in that, but there's really not many people that are willing to put effort into spearfishing here. So I think it's a little bit of an untouched gem. There's probably more people spearfishing off any given beach in the Coromandel than on the North Shore, you know. Living in Auckland is no excuse to not be a diver, especially if you're on the North Shore. Get out there and get into it. Goodbye Takapuna, we will see you again in the near future. Until then, we're out. This morning we're out on the boat again, headed out eastward into the Hauraki Gulf, past Rangitoto, Maota Tapu, Rakino, out to the noises and the ahas, to get on to some beautiful diving for the day. The use of a boat is essential if you want to see everything that the Gulf has to offer. As much fun as shore diving is, where the Gulf really shines is out in the depths, in the outer islands, where deep water meets shallow structure, fish congregate, and dreams are made. Let's go diving, let's get into it, I'm keen as. Upon hitting the water, I am delighted to see that it is blue and relatively clear. You don't always get this lucky in the Hauraki Gulf. It's not always like this, it's often green and murky. So when it is, you're extremely grateful a lot of the time. Once you get yourself comfortable in the water, it's time to load your gun, and the hunting can begin. Every moment you spend with your gun unloaded, you're potentially missing out on the opportunity to shoot a fish, so it pays to get this done quickly. Oftentimes you can jump in on a spot and the fish will come up straight away to check you out, and then disappear after that. Your first few dives in an area, the first few minutes that you spend there can often be the most productive, because none of the fish have been scared away yet. Don't waste your time with an unloaded gun mucking around, get in the water, get your stuff sorted, get your gun loaded, and start hunting. On the first few dives of the day, I'm usually extremely picky. Even if I see fish that I want, I'm sticking out for something that I really want. This day I want to shoot a kingfish. There's a few trevally around, even some good sized ones. However, I look past them, I'm out there trying to get that kingfish. That's what I came there for. I'm not going to waste these first couple dives, blow the opportunity of the kingfish on these trevally, which I'd be less satisfied with shooting. However, they're still good trevally, and they kind of hung around a lot more after sensing the fact that I'm not super interested in them. Getting close to those fish if I was trying to shoot them might have been potentially a lot more difficult. We've got some cohera as well. Another brilliant table fish. I love eating cohera, they're one of my favourites hands down. But I'm here for a kingfish, so I'm not going to shoot them. I also know that kingfish love eating cohera, and they're often not far behind. The fish were around, and given enough time I might have found a kingfish. However, we got other stuff to do today. So it's back onto the boat, chuck the BCDs on, chuck the tanks on, put a regulator in your mouth, flop over the back, and we're down for some scuba diving. Crayfish can be found at all depths. People in the South Island talk about finding them in like rock pools and stuff like that. I've never seen it myself, but I don't doubt it. In the Hauraki Gulf, however, finding crayfish, you often have to go deeper and further. Deeper underwater and further into caves. There's less crayfish around, and they're harder to get onto. They can be pretty shy, and I don't blame them. When you're going after crayfish, you still need to be considerate of your environment and your circumstances, especially when you're freediving. Be considerate of the fact that you need to make it to the surface. Same goes for scuba as well. Don't get yourself too stuck. I know somebody who went for a crayfish, went down into the crevasse, got lodged in there, regulator fell out of their mouth and out of reach. The only reason they were fine was because their buddy was there and they pulled them out. If they were by themselves, things would have been very different. However, it could have been avoided by just not getting that tunnel vision when you see that trophy crayfish. Communicating with your buddy is extremely important when you're going after crayfish, because if something goes wrong, they might have to literally pull you out of there and save your life. So it pays to be diving with someone that you have experience with and are comfortable with beforehand. This scuba dive, I'm diving with my dad. We've done a lot of diving together. I'm a scuba diving instructor and he's been diving longer than me, so we have a little bit of experience. We're down at about 20-25 meters in this crevasse. However, we're not biting off more than we can chew. We have the experience, but you need to be aware of that. Don't be putting yourself in situations that are just like downright stupid, trying to get like cool GoPro footage or because you saw somebody else do it. Be realistic about your abilities and live to dive another day. Keep going and you'll get better, but don't push yourself too far or that's the end of it. Going into this cave in search of crayfish is not something I'd do with anybody that they didn't trust or knew had the experience. When you're doing stuff where the stakes are high and the probability of something going wrong is realistic, don't be picking idiots to dive with. And my dad isn't an idiot. That's not where I got it from. In fact, he's taught me a lot. He's the reason that I dive. He got me into it, as well as creating me. So, if you want to thank someone, thank my dad, because that's the reason this channel's here. Seeing these kingies was fantastic. Absolutely lovely to see. But at the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wish I had a spear gun there. Spearfishing on scuba generally is not a good idea, especially shooting big fish. I used to do a lot of hitchhiking back in the day, and I hitchhiked with this guy who used to be a commercial fisherman or something. Anyway, he did a lot of spearfishing as well. He was down on scuba, shot a kingfish, kingfish dragged him to the surface. If you know much about gas compression at depth, barometric pressure changes, all that sort of stuff, yeah, you know that's no good. Basically, all the air in his lungs overexpanded, causing his lungs to rupture, and he never dived again since then. Freediving after scuba diving is avoided by many people, and I would probably recommend that you do the same. At depth on scuba, all the tissues in our body are taking on excess nitrogen due to the pressure. This is off-gas when we're at the surface. It's a natural process, and at the rate it usually happens, there's no cause for concern. However, it's believed that while this off-gassing process is happening, it can be detrimental to be going up and down with huge pressure changes as you would in freediving. The rate at which nitrogen leaves our body and our susceptibility to decompression illness is dependent on a range of factors: health, fitness, and how often you go diving essentially. As someone who goes diving a lot, keeps myself fit, healthy, and I'm relatively young, I decide to roll the dice. As I get down to the bottom, I am greeted by what I was hoping to see: a school of beautiful kingfish. Coming in, turning broadside, I extend my gun out on the biggest fish, flick my wrist at the last second and take a terrible shot. The shot that I delivered this kingfish was nothing short of tragic, hitting it in the lower jaw. Fought for a few seconds before ripping off unsurprisingly. Getting to the surface, I frantically rushed to reload my gun as the kingfish is still hanging around. However, by the time I managed to get the band over the shaft, the kingfish had moved on, and it was time for us to move on as well. But we're back out again, headed off to Rangitoto this time, checking out the lighthouse. My parents plan on walking up the mountain. I'm going to jump in the water, see what I can run into, check out this new spot, see what it's holding. I'm pretty excited. Always excited to check out new spots, especially so close to home. If this is a good spot, man, like, awesome, because it's not very far, like kayaking distance even. Stingrays are cool, and eagle rays in particular are quite abundant throughout the Hauraki Gulf. I've encountered them all the way from the outer islands to the North Shore beaches. There's quite a few of them around, and they're always very nice to run into. Spectacular the way they move through the water in such a unique shape. Eagle rays spend a lot of time bing chilling, parked up on the bottom, waiting, sleeping, resting. However, they're often on the move as well. Sometimes if you follow them, they can take you to some cool spots, and take you to the fish even. Eagle rays seem to be quite social animals, often preferring being in groups or swimming in pairs. I think that the abundance of eagle rays that I often see diving is due to a couple factors. Mainly the fact that people don't really like eating them, and secondly, that people think they're quite cute for the most part. There's no real negative stigma attached to stingrays, except for Steve Irwin. Sharks on the other hand, a lot of people are scared of sharks, and that's the problem they run into. That's why a lot of sharks have died historically. With fish, people like eating fish. That's why a lot of fish have died. People don't really like eating stingrays, and there's not much of a negative stigma attached to them, so they've done reasonably well, I think. On the inside of the small rocks and islands where the stingrays were hanging out, the visibility was acceptable, I guess. When I ventured out past the barrier into like slightly deeper water, it was nasty. It was a dark day to begin with, but when you got down to the bottom, with this water clarity, nothing was making it down, and it was like legit scary. On top of that, storm started rolling in, so we pulled the pin and decided to get out of there. The weather is always something we will have to contend with when spearfishing. And even with the best technologies, satellites, all that sort of stuff, scientists, we still have a really hard time creating an accurate prediction for what the weather's going to do. So it pays to be vigilant and keep an eye out for things before they sneak up on you. Because of all the islands in and around the Hauraki Gulf, it can actually calm down very quickly after storms. The water settles quite fast here. When you're on, say, the east coast of the Coromandel or Northland, you're facing that big sea on the east side. If a storm rolls through, it can be days before that swell kind of settles back down. But in the Hauraki Gulf, there's not really much of a fetch. Around Auckland, there is a hell of a lot of diving spots actually. A lot of reefs, shore dive spots, boat spots, and it's all really accessible because it's so sheltered. You can get out in Auckland a lot more often than you can in other places. Sure, there's probably not going to be as good viz or as many fish, but in terms of accessibility, I can't really think of many better places, honestly. Parori frolic mid-water in the sunlit shallows of the Hauraki Gulf. But what catches my eye is the shape behind the New Zealand trevally. A fish that captivates me time and time again. Beautiful eating and beautiful hunting. Spotting fish underwater is sort of a skill in its own right. It's not easy a lot of the time. Fish are very well adapted at camouflaging underwater, whether that be in a very literal sense, the way their body is formed, or reflective scales that reflect light in certain ways that make them quite hard to see underwater. The best way to look for fish is generally going to be looking for their movement. Often fish have very little contrast with the background environment, by design. Every fish seems to move in a way that's unique to its own, and by this movement you can often tell what the fish is before you can really see it. With enough time in the water, you can get a good understanding of how certain fish swim and be able to easily identify them. However, this information isn't necessarily that easy to describe. In the example of trevally, I could say they like swimming reasonably fast, darting around a couple meters above the kelp, but that really doesn't do the fish justice and isn't a very good description of their movement. I guess I potentially lack the vocabulary to properly articulate fish movement currently. For this next mission, I got an invite from my good mate Will. We're out on his family boat, headed out to Kowal Island. I'm incredibly grateful for the experience and the opportunity. I'm excited to dive Kowal because it's my first time actually out there.
100%. Any John Dory is a dead John Dory. Can you check us so his fins will? Sure.
Diving in new places is so much fun because you never know what you're going to run into. It could be the next gold mine or spot X, you never know. There's only one way to find out, you just got to get out there, get into it and go and see for yourself.
See you guys soon.
Yell out if you need.
Yo.
When diving new spots, it is wise to exercise caution. In areas that you know, you're aware of all the factors, influences, dangers, things to look out for, where the boats are going to be going, stuff like that. When you're diving new spots, you don't know, so just take it a bit easier. Always have an exit plan. When you're shore diving or boat diving, you always got to make sure that if you need to, there's a way that you can get out of the water, and it's not a 1 kilometer swim away. If you're diving off a boat, beforehand it pays to communicate with the people on the boat what you plan on doing and how long you plan on being out there for. Losing somebody in the water is really scary, and if you're out there for too long, people are going to start worrying about you. And it's honestly not a nice sort of worrying either. It's much better being the one in the water getting worried about than the person worrying. It's very stressful. There's been instances where I've been out diving with people, we've gotten separated, I've made it back to the shore beforehand, they haven't turned up for a little bit, and the whole time you're thinking like, fuck man, like how am I going to tell like their family? It's rough. Don't keep people waiting on you. Communicate with them beforehand, let them know what they're doing, let them know what you're doing and how to help you if anything does go wrong. Be honest and realistic about how long you plan on diving. Allow for flexibility. Don't say you're going for a short dive if it's not going to be a short dive, or you have a overwhelming temptation to make it longer when you see all the fish. I have done the same in the past. I've told my girlfriend I've been out, going to go out for a quick dive, ended up being out there for quite a while, had her worrying about me, and it's just not a good thing to do overall. So be honest and realistic about how long you plan on being out there diving to avoid upsetting people essentially. The first day was awesome, however I managed to lose all of the best footage. So you're going to have to imagine this. I ended up shooting a reasonable snapper around 5-6 pound mark. Later on, shot a butterfish, was reloading my gun, swimming up to a point, look in the gutter below me and there's a head the size of mine looking back at me. Absolutely massive snapper. End up spooking him off, but he manages to live another day. We're back in the water again for day 2, straight off the bat by a beautiful bronze whaler shark. Always spectacular to see these guys. Having the shark come up to me straight as I entered the water almost felt like it was coming to say, "You're in my house, mate, better behave." Blue moki are a large reef fish, prolific in New Zealand's colder southern waters. However, they occasionally venture north. I've seen a few in the Coromandel, even fewer in Northland, but never any in the Hauraki Gulf. This is a first for me. Usually a very trusting fish, this blue moki spotted me from a distance. I'm swimming on top, trying to keep an eye on him, trying to get some footage and thinking about potentially making a shot. Blue moki aren't a fish that's very highly regarded in the North Island. They seem to really like them in the South Island, but at least here in the North Island they're not like one of those A tier target species, so I'm not hugely fussed on shooting it. Sometimes it can be quite easy to predict the way that fish are coming from, due to bottom structure or current. However, sometimes they're going to be coming from all directions and you're right in the middle of it. So you've got to be moving your head around constantly, scanning, analysing, trying to see things that you want and things that are dangers to you. Spatial awareness is huge in spearfishing, and you don't realise how limited your field of vision is a lot of the time, until you go diving with a buddy, and you try wave at them from anything but right in front of their face and they don't see it. If anybody out there feels like making a mask with a GoPro mount and wing mirrors, get at me. I'm interested. This morning I jumped straight off the boat, off the mooring in the bay, and started swimming out to the point. As I approached the point I started to see some kingfish. The current was picking up, the visibility was dropping, the sun was coming up. Things were really starting to kick off here. It was exciting and I wanted a kingfish, but I wasn't 100% sure that it was a good idea. I was by myself and I'd seen a shark just minutes earlier really. As I'm down on the bottom, a nice school of kingfish approaches me. I decide, hey, if one presents me with a good shot, I might take it. Here I'm looking around a bit, making sure old mate from earlier is not sneaking back up on me before turning my attention back to the kingfish. They didn't really like that. They can probably tell that I'm not very relaxed. Bit of tension in my body, bit of worry. Are the kingfish going to come in? Are they not? Am I going to want to take the shot? Am I not? Is the shark going to come? Is it not? And they can sense it and they weren't too interested. Upon further thought, I think it might be possible that the kingfish could tell that I was like looking out for something and almost scared in a way. Like if you jumped in the water with like a real big fish, like a big shark, and you saw it fucking like looking around and like scared, you would shit yourself, because you'd be like, if that thing is bigger than me and it's worried, I should probably get out of here. Your mentality changes the whole world around you. Not just how you see it, but how others see it as well. Your thoughts and actions influence others, not just other humans, but other beings. Being in control of your thoughts and feelings benefits you in many aspects of life, especially spearfishing. Be conscious about the energy and the vibrations that you're putting out into the world. Every day we experience a full range of emotions, from love to hate and everything in between. But what you act on and what you choose to keep with you is your decision. Everything that we internalize changes us over time, but not just us, also the world around us. Be conscious about what you carry with you. I will leave you with this video of a shark being caught on rod and reel. Have your own opinion about it. I will reserve my own. I'm trying to be increasingly respectful to other ways that people gather kai moana, because not everybody has the ability to dive. Hello and welcome back to another video. It's currently Christmas Eve. I'm in Mangawhai. We're going for a dive. Hopefully shoot some fish, see how we get on. Car coming! Conditions today are looking pretty nice. I'm excited to get in the water. Yeah, we'll see how we get on. We're on broad hype along blue. Goes hard as fuck, man. I love diving on the planes. Hello and welcome back to another video. In this episode, we're in Mangawhai. It's currently Christmas Eve. The conditions are looking pretty nice and we're going for a dive. Needless to say, I'm quite excited to get in the water. When am I not? So Mangawhai isn't technically in the Hauraki Gulf, but don't crucify me, it's not far outside of it. It lies probably only 5 to 10 kilometers to the north of it. When we hop on the boat, we're going to be going north up the coast. If you allow me some leniency and pretend that we go south, we're still in the Hauraki Gulf. If you're taking a boat out, it pays to consider beforehand what you're going to encounter getting out there. Coming out of Mangawhai here, we got a bar to deal with. The best time to cross the bar is generally going to be on the higher side of the tide, with low swell, so it's not breaking over the bar. The best thing you can do when crossing a bar is following a boat of somebody who's experienced, somebody who's gone across the bar before, knows where to go. You can follow them and they'll lead you out safely. From there, if you're using a plotter on your charter, you'll know the exact route to take from then on. Never underestimate the ocean, because it could cost you your life, very literally. Bars are not something to mess around with. If the conditions aren't right, you're not confident, it's not safe, don't go out there. When I was living in Taira, I was involved in an incident with a boat that flipped on the bar. I wasn't on the boat, but I was involved with it. It was not a nice thing at all. There were multiple children on the boat, Nobody was wearing life jackets. The skipper ended up drowning and dying, and a helicopter came. Absolutely tragic, and just something that is so unnecessary. If people take the right safety precautions and don't overestimate their abilities, yeah, we don't have to have people die out there. As much fun as scuba diving is, I think spearfishing will always be my preference. I feel more connected to the ocean. I feel like I'm actually doing something. I'm relying on my body as opposed to systems and mechanisms created by mechanics and engineers. Sure, we do use equipment and technology in freediving, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to you. This day, my dad and his brother Aaron are going to be jumping in for a scuba dive, while I try pick up some fish on the spear, hoping ideally for a kingfish. I make my own rubbers for my spear gun, because I don't trust anybody else to do it. However, that doesn't mean that I necessarily totally trust myself either. I'm very specific about the way I like my gear set up, and I've never once taken my gun to a shop to be rigged and not be disappointed. So for years now, I've been doing it all myself, and it's something that I strongly suggest that you learn how to do as well. It will save you money, time, and it's just really good to have an understanding of your gear and how it functions. Recently before this dive, I'd cut the rubbers on my main spear gun, making them shorter and more powerful. Unfortunately, shortly after entering the water, one of them pulled out at the anchor side, so we're using the mini roller gun for the rest of today. Always good to have a backup with you. Bands on roller guns are typically going to be under more tension than that of a conventional gun. Make sure that you pull your knots as tight as you possibly can, and it's often going to be worth testing out your gun, making sure that the rubbers are holding before you go out on a big mission trying to shoot fish. When I plan on shooting kingfish, I'm a lot more intentional about the other species that I target. For example, here in this next clip there's a butterfish. I could have taken a shot here, but I really wasn't that interested. If I'd shot this and a kingfish, I would have felt bad about it at the end of the day. Porcupine fish are interesting critters, often bumbling around the reefs, kinda silly. But damn are they cute. They'd be made for cuddling if they weren't covered in spikes. Of the three ray species that you often see, long-tailed stingrays have got to be the most interesting to me. In the past I hadn't seen many, usually quite deep hanging out on the sand, but recently since diving around Auckland I've actually seen quite a few. When I have my mind set on trying to shoot a kingfish, I'm usually very picky. However, there are fish that I can't help but try and shoot. Koheru for instance. Koheru are hands down one of the tastiest fish in the ocean. While I spotted these koheru from the surface, I'm making a dive all the way down to the bottom, getting right down onto the rocks, grabbing onto the kelp and hunting the fish from there. You can hunt koheru from mid-water, but at this depth it's not very deep, so I'll be having to fight my positive buoyancy. The koheru come through, I line up, take a shot, but it goes high. Koheru don't present much of a target, but that's no excuse to miss them, just take better shots. I made a shot at the fish once they had moved past me and were swimming off at an angle. I should have been more decisive and taken the earlier opportunity at the fish while they were approaching me. By doing that, I could have avoided needlessly injuring a fish. You live and you learn, but this is a mistake that I keep making. I need to do more to prevent this from happening in the future. I feel like trevallies fall midway in the spectrum of demersal and pelagic species. While associating commonly with reef structure, they never really get right down to the reef. Here we can see typical trevally behaviour. While hanging out around the reef, they're preferring the more open areas, the areas of exposed rock where they're probably more safe from predators. As well as that, they're hanging reasonably high off the bottom. You're never really going to see one down hiding in the kelp mooching like a snapper. It's amazing how fish react to pointing a spear gun at them. It's almost like they intuitively know that it's a weapon. Trevally don't usually stick around for too long, preferring instead to roam the reef. If you do a dive in this trevally there, often by the time you've breathed up, take another dive, they've moved off. So usually when I'm hunting trevally, I'm swimming around till I can see some action from the surface and making a dive when I know the school's there. Hunting trevally mid-water works very well out in the open ocean and in bait balls. On the reef, I've had very little luck. I've found you either got to get right down to the bottom or just stay on the surface. If you're sitting mid-water, the trevally are going to want nothing to do with you. What happens next is another great example of hesitation. I hesitate too much on the shot. When you extend your spear gun, that's when you should be making the shot. Once you put your spear gun out, you shouldn't be tracking. If you put your spear gun out and you don't get the shot you want, withdraw and wait for another opportunity. With your gun now extended, the fish are going to be a lot more flighty, more agitated and scared of you. making a good shot far less likely. After this, the trevally moved off. Breathing up on the surface, I'm approached by a school of kingfish. I know my chances of getting close enough up here are slim to none with the 50cm roller gun. So I make a drop, headed down to the bottom. Kingfish are extremely curious, and I reckon if I can get down to the bottom without giving them a reason to fear me, I might get close enough to take a shot. Sometimes the best way to obtain the things that you want in life is not the most direct route. The fish are yet to approach, not the friendliest. If I had gone straight for them, there is probably no chance I would have ever got close. Posted up on the bottom, I wait in anticipation, with my body turned to the seaward side. What emerges from the gloom is exactly what I was hoping for, a kingfish. I underestimated the size of the fish, and didn't push myself off the ledge getting closer. I thought I had a safe shot. So I was just pondering the size of the fish, and I decided to measure the shaft of the spear gun I used. For comparison, the shaft is 80cm, so you can ascertain what you want about the fish from that. As always, it feels terrible injuring fish, but I reckon this one will be okay. Kingfish are hardy, and the shaft didn't make it too far into it, probably not even down to the flopper. I wish it all the best in its recovery, and I'm terribly sorry for inflicting the damage I did upon it. Diving the Hauraki Gulf recently has been a lot of fun, but it's also been hard work. I'm based in Auckland nowadays, so there's probably going to be quite a bit of diving out in the Gulf, and I can't wait to further explore it with you. As we go deeper, further, bluer, more fish, more awesomeness, more videos, I can't wait to take you along for the ride. Thank you for coming diving with me. I really appreciate every time that you do. Connecting with people like you allows me to share what I love, and together we can change the world for the better. You motivate me to be a better person. Every small thing, whether it's a view, a like, a comment, adds fuel to the fire that is within me and compels me to do this, to speak my voice and try and make a difference, to be heard and be felt. Thank you for joining me. The mission wouldn't be possible without you and others like us.